Indeed, a Friday. And let me tell you something. An absolutely, beautiful, beautiful Friday. Gorgeous day. It's going to be a perfect night for high school football. And I think it's supposed to be a perfect weekend. When you go out and about today and you are enjoying the perfectly unimpeded by humidity, crisp, thin feel of comfortable room temperature air and the golden hue of the sunshine, then you know exactly what your Indianapolis Colts are experiencing this weekend. Because last night, went to dinner, and the sun was setting, and I said, there's this golden hue over it, and then I was 52 and 10 months old, 52 years and 10 months old before I realized that because I said, that looks like the gold of the California sun, and then I realized, I think that's what happens when there's no humidity. And that's why it looks that way. That's what it was like last night. It's what it will be, I think, for the majority of the weekend. And the Colts will be in fact, the Golden State taking on the Rams of Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium coming up on Sunday. And there is a lot to unpack from that. But there's a lot to unpack in general over the course of getting you set for the sports weekend. The Fever in action tonight. That, of course, a critical Game 3 taking on Las Vegas at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. You have the Pacers, believe it or not, we're already into the season now of press conferences and media days and preparing for the upcoming season. And you can only imagine, and your mind starts to race, to think about the mania it would be. A, if they had won. And B, if Tyrese Halliburton does not get hurt and Miles, but you know what? Those things that they didn't win. And Tyrese Halliburton got hurt and Miles Turner signed elsewhere. And that's cool. It's not cool. Miles Turner's case, I understand it. Tyrese Halliburton's case, I understand that as well. I understand why he went out there and put it all on the line. And now, the Pacers, it is odd because going into the season, you continue to think to yourself in the back of your mind, man, they're right there. And then you're like, oh, that's right, I forgot. It's going to be, I still think, a competitive year and a fun year to watch, but there is a little bit of a go back a few spaces and see what will happen for you. But Chad Buchanan yesterday, in talking to the local media, had some interesting things to say. We will get to that over the course of today as well. But let's begin with the Colts and the NFL. I thought last night, if you watched it, there were a couple of things taking place in that game between the Seahawks and the Cardinals that, two teams that obviously the Colts will face this year, but they were indicative of and signs towards things with the Colts. And both teams gave example of why, if you are the Colts, you continue to push through. Push through is the wrong way, I guess, with one player. Push through, wait through the growing areas. We'll begin with Seattle. Sam Darnold. I think everybody knows the story of Sam Darnold. Comes out of USC. Has a lot of promise about him, even though USC has been and always will be one of the most tradition-rich programs in college football. It is not one that has produced a lot of, wow, this guy really panned out for us quarterbacks. But Sam Darnold goes in early in his career, a lot of expectation, never meets the expectation, kind of becomes a journeyman, kind of becomes forgotten about, becomes a little bit of a cast-off, and then last year is completely rejuvenated with the Minnesota Vikings. And the Minnesota Vikings had that decision to make. Do we continue through with this and take another spin at the roulette wheel with Sam Darnold, or do we have to go ahead and mortgage everything into the hands of a young quarterback and put it in the hands of what we believe to be the future? The guy that we drafted initially anyway, and J.J. McCarthy, who got hurt. Thus, we had to play Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had this magical season, but do we know what the ceiling is with Sam Darnold? And do we believe that there is more to be captured by letting J.J. McCarthy then take over? And Darnold goes to Seattle, and yes, he is probably not the sole reason or maybe not even the majority reason why they are off to a decent start at 3-1, but I think, Eddie, you would agree, not that we are paying a lot of attention to what goes on in the NFC West, but I think a lot of people, and I haven't looked actually specifically at what their schedule is, but I think a lot of people probably would look at the Seattle Seahawks and say that so far is a surprise through 4 games, that they're 3-1.
When you look at it, Jake, it's not that Sam Darnold has played great. He just hasn't played terrible. Like, he hasn't won them games. He hasn't lost them games. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what Daniel Jones has done here with the Indianapolis Colts.
Which is why last night is a good example of the blueprint of what Indianapolis may be where they are, because the Colts eventually, and I know it's just 3 games in, but if the Colts are weighing out the decision at the end of the year of, do we sign Daniel Jones and is this our long-term guy? And maybe they have a better roster around them than Seattle has right now, but the Colts are going to have that question to ask. Assuming that they maintain the level of play that they have been enjoying from Daniel Jones this year and from their team in general. I'm not saying that they go 17-0, but assuming that they are competitive throughout the course of the year and Daniel Jones continues to play well, then in that capacity, do you then at the end of the year, very similar to Minnesota from a year ago, do you say, okay, we have a young player that we believe is potentially our future? Do we hand it back over to them and hope that we have built up enough around the quarterbacking position that that's going to be okay? Or do we stick with what is working for us? And in the case of the Vikings, they took the decision that it was the roster around Sam Darnold perhaps that was giving them success, and therefore they were comfortable handing it over to J.J. McCarthy and letting it grow with him. I know with the Colts it's a little different because you've already seen a lot of body of work from Anthony Richardson. But when you see Sam Darnold playing the way he is right now, does Minnesota then say, you know what, it wasn't a fluke? He did. Maybe it took him longer as an NFL quarterback, but the stability he found here in Minnesota, seemingly he is carrying with him to Seattle, because to the point that Eddie just made, maybe he's just a game manager, but he is still making plays in Seattle. Does that factor into what? And I do think that the Colts, regardless, so maybe a little bit of a moot point, I think the Colts have already made their decision that next year, if they had to pick one of these 2 guys, I think Daniel Jones, assuming that they can come to an agreement with him, does come back. And I think he's going to be their quarterback for a couple of years. I don't think that they are in the market, in the business, have the interest level of starting it over and saying, you know what, we got to go find our next franchise quarterback. I think they look at it and they say, no, let's strengthen the areas around Daniel Jones and take our chance for, 3 to 4 years with him. But as for Daniel Jones, and then the other side of it, by the way, is if you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., tons of promise and far more hope, expectation, and reason to believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to be an elite-level receiver than, say, A.D. Mitchell or even Alec Pierce. But nonetheless, a guy that has been very inconsistent, a guy that there was a lot of praise and expectation about what he was going to do. Part of that's based on his name. Part of it's based on the fact that when he was at Ohio State, he was a walking first down. But it has not taken off in Arizona. You see flashes of it, but it's not been consistent. And last night was a case where through 3 quarters you're saying, man, like what in the world is going on with him? And then boom, he finally gets it on track in the 4th quarter. He has a great touchdown catch. He kind of puts it together, and it just goes to show you, I do think that and I'm not saying that quarter means that now all of a sudden he's on track and he's running, but I do think that wide receiver is a position that takes longer for guys to get acclimated than probably any other in the NFL not being quarterback. I think the timing, the route running, I think the biggest thing that's hard for receivers is when you play in college, you automatically, assuming that you are an NFL caliber receiver, when you play in college, you are so used to separation and turning around and having the ball there. And when you play in the NFL, you don't really get separation. So when you turn around, you've got to anticipate the ball is going to be there right then. There is no hesitation because you don't get yourself a gap window. There are windows in college. There are not windows in the NFL. And if you're a guy that's been used to being able to kind of just wait for a second or know that even when you make the catch, you got time to make a move or whatever else, that does not happen in the NFL. And I think that's an acclimation period that receivers have to get used to. But last night I thought that game, as we are analyzing where the Colts are right now, was indicative of two of the storylines for the Colts that will be fascinating to watch over the course of this year. One of them being, is Daniel Jones a keep the seat warm kind of guy? And if they think that's what he is, does, say, the success of Sam Darnold translating to another franchise give Indianapolis reason to believe, okay, what we're seeing in Jones here probably does continue and carry on, so we may as well keep it here and re-sign him. And then the receiver situation that I talked about as you are waiting for some of his weapons to develop, notably A.D. Mitchell, and we're starting to see it now with Alec Pierce that we didn't see earlier in the tenure. There are several ways to communicate with this program. The first of which, of course, is to always call in at 239-1070. We got a loaded show today. We have plenty to talk about, but the telephone number is 239-1070. Additionally, we have the text line where you can text the show at 239-1070. Now, just so everybody knows, there are two ways to text, and I say that my personal cell because I've given it out so many times, I think a lot of people have it in their phone. When you text the show, that is available and can be seen by all of us that are on the air. So I can look right now and see who texted the morning show. I can see who texted yesterday in the afternoon, etc. But it is not a public text. So in other words, other people that are texting the show are not seeing it. There is not a site where other people can see that. So if that's something of concern to you, totally understand. And then obviously at my number as well, which is 523-9288. Now, Eddie, sometimes when I give up my cell phone number, and again, that's a 317 area code, and then 523-9288. Occasionally, I do it just as a listener gauge because I'm curious if anybody's. I don't think my mom's listening today. I think she's tied up, right? We know that we have 26 female listeners. Some question if that number's as high as 29. I think it's more around 26. But I like to know sometimes, just in general, I get insecure, and I just want to know if people are listening at all.
I'm glad you finally admit you have insecurities, Jake.
So if you're listening right now and you on either of those two ways, then you can simply send me a message. Like, for example, Justin and Fishers that just said, can Jake see this? Yes, Justin, I can. Thank you. Much appreciated. But if you're listening right now on one of those two ways, send me a text that just says, yes, you're listening. Because otherwise, Eddie and I might just head down to Starbucks. Did you see that Starbucks, apparently they're closing a bunch of stores?
What?
I just read this. Starbucks announced today they're closing like multiple hundred stores. Indiana does not appear yet to be on the list.
Okay, good. I have nothing to worry about then.
Well, you get your Java House. I'll get you some Java House just in case, right?
I know. That's why I don't have to worry about it.
I know. You got the peel and pour pods, right? I'm going to get you as addicted as I am to the peel and pour from Java House, and then we're going to be good to go. Pacers yesterday. Some things were said, I thought, interesting from Chad Buchanan talking about the direction of the Pacers. And one of the things that he touched on is the fact that when you look at the way the Pacers have played, you look at the style they played, and I've always talked about the way their offense ran, Eddie, I thought was so – Miles Turner was such an important part of that. And the bad analogy that I use for this is – it's the bad analogy sound from Fish. Thank you. We always appreciate that. Miles Turner is like a sprinkler in their offense. And if you think about a sprinkler that is in the backyard and it just oscillates around, spraying that water everywhere, right? Miles Turner, the way that they ran their offense was he would come up, he would flash to the high post, they would get him the ball, And then you just had kind of this rotation. Siakam would be down in the block, but Nesmith in the corner. Toppin was very good at this. Goes without saying, Halliburton, Nembhard. They would kind of rotate through up towards the top. And Miles Turner was the starter of this. But they would literally like hot potato it and just facilitate the ball around in circular motion until finally it goes into one that has themselves an open spot and an open look. And Turner was such an important part of that aspect of their offense, combined with the fact that Halliburton could play at pace and dictate pace. And Tyrese Halliburton and his ability, and Nembhard can do this as well. But if you look at each and every player on that roster that was so important to Indiana in their run to the finals, Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton, Obi Toppin, Pascal Siakam, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd. The thing about all of those guys is that all of them have potential. I'm not saying reliance on, but they all have potential in spurt to play at a faster pace than the person in which is their opposition. And so that allowed Indiana to just play this like kind of frantic pace. When you take now Turner out of that, and you now have your offensive focus be less Halliburton Turner and more Siakam, even though Siakam was an incredibly important part of what they were doing, when Siakam would get the basketball, oftentimes that sprinkler, it then became more of just the oscillating back and forth spray sprinkler when Siakam would get the ball. Things would slow down because Siakam can do isolation stuff on the low block. I think you're going to see this year more of that, where it's going to be less like the frantic, quick nature of it and more slowing things down. And part of that is because of the fact that Turner and Halliburton are not there. And part of that is because of the fact that the players that you now need to see more of, as they take advantage this year, and we'll hear from Chad Buchanan later in the program and see if he adds to this. But when you look at the players that this year I think they want to develop and really see what they have, it's Mathurin and Jarace Walker. And Mathurin and Jarace Walker are the two guys, if you were to make a list of every player on the Pacer roster, they are the two players that you would say, while other players you'd say the thing that makes them unique is they can play pace beyond their opposition. And in the case of Walker and Mathurin, the thing that makes them unique is they can play physicality above their opposition. Mathurin is essentially a 3, but he's a 3 that likes to bulldog, use strength, lower body strength, get down, get on the block, get to the free throw line. He does that more than most players that play his position. Walker is a 3 or a 4, and when he's on the block and backing people down, if he has somebody that is essentially a 3 guarding him, he is more physical than that. But in order to facilitate for those two guys and take advantage of what makes them unique, it means that you kind of have to slow things down in terms of the style you're playing. So the question becomes, do those two become the rare anomaly in an offense that is still running fast, or do they slow down that offense without Halliburton and Turner there, and Turner obviously not coming back, and say, okay, we are going to, for the most part, prioritize and become a different look offensively this year? Chad Buchanan touched on that a little bit. We'll get to that later in the show as well. Mention the Fever in action tonight. This is, Eddie, you don't say necessarily must win because they have home court advantage and they need 2 wins. Even if they lose, obviously they still get another chance to keep it alive and head it back to Vegas. Mm-hmm. Having said that, it feels to me must win.
Yeah, Jake, because Vegas is a team that you're more than likely not going to beat 2 times in a row. And if you are, it's going to happen tonight, and then it will happen on Sunday afternoon. It's not going to happen with Game 4 here and then Game 5 in Las Vegas, just because of the home court aspect, the splits of Indiana in terms of three-point shooting at home versus the road. They are one of the best teams in the league at home when it comes to three-point shooting. They're one of the worst teams in the WNBA on the road when it comes to three-point shooting. Now, saying that, the Fever have done a great job so far through 2 games at limiting the amount of threes that Las Vegas has been making. They've made 5 in each of the first 2 games. That is something that Indiana will have to continue to do in order to stay in the series and maybe pull off the upset because, as Stephanie White has said countless times this postseason, they just don't have the shooters to be able to match and get into these shootouts where you're matching 3 for 3. They have to find ways to match the scoring, and most of that's going to be limiting threes and limiting free throws. And that was not the case in game number 2. Vegas got to the line more. They outscored them in the paint by a wide margin, and they were able to just play a lot better defensively, specifically with their guards in defending Kelsey Mitchell and Odyssey Sims.
You know, the game tonight will be it's going to be a great night in Central Indiana because you have that game going on. Obviously, as I talked about, we're going to be getting set for a big weekend in college football and the Colts in L.A., and then high school football as well. You know, somebody that I talk a lot of high school football just in terms of like retroactively, and I've mentioned this before, the love that I have for Friday Night Lights in Indiana. I think it's very underrated in terms of the passion for it. Tonight is a perfect night to go and watch high school football. The weather's going to be great. There's rivalry games. When I was in high school, the world rose and set with Carmel and North Central. That was the biggest rivalry. We lived for it when I was a freshman at North Central. As a matter of fact, a senior. When I was a senior in high school and I was going down to visit the University of Alabama on a college visit, and Brady Barr, who was, now how about this for the way things used to be in the world? Brady Barr was a biology teacher when I was in high school. He is now with National Geographic Explorer. And Brady had a really good friend who had gone to Alabama, and he was going down to an Alabama football game, and I was a student assistant for him. He was not my teacher, but I was a student assistant for him. And he was like, hey, I'm going down to the Alabama game. I know that you are looking to go to school there. And my parents said, well, why don't you go with Brady down to the game? So I went with Brady Barr, who was a teacher when I was a senior. I mean, it was completely innocuous, but I don't know that would happen today. But on the drive down, we stopped 3 times on the drive down on Friday night to use pay phones at rest areas to call and get updates from Kevin Wright, who is now the head coach at Carmel, who was Brady's roommate and was an assistant at North Central at the time, just to find out like what was going on in the game itself. Kevin was like the freshman football coach and, you know, was helping out varsity defensive backs and whatever else. But that's how big that weekend was. I mean, we had to know what was going on. We had to know what was going on in that game. That's a huge rivalry game. But there are rivalry games going on all over the place.
Are you going to try to make it tonight?
What's that?
You going to try to make it to watch your Panthers?
I would, except for that I am doing a fundraiser tonight along with Tony Kanaan for a school on the southeast side.
Now, is it Kanaan or Keenan?
Tony Kanaan when he first came to the country. Now Tony Kanaan based on the appropriation of the way people say his name. But, yeah, he and I are doing a fundraiser. I'll tell you about that later because it's for a school that's very cool on the southeast side.
Oh, so it got Americanized is what you're saying.
What's that?
It got Americanized.
That's exactly right. A huge night in high school football. We'll go over all of it, and we'll do so with Kyle Neddenriep. Big show lined up for you. I mentioned Stephanie White going to join us 2 o'clock. 1 o'clock, a former Colts quarterback that can elaborate on why exactly Daniel Jones may be finding comfort at stop number 2 in his career that he didn't have in stop 1 in his career, because there's a former Colts quarterback that I think can relate and identify to that. We'll do that conversation coming up 1 o'clock. But when we come back, Indianapolis Star, Kyle Neddenriep next on a Friday. It took a second when that started. I couldn't remember what song this was, and I said, yeah, Eddie, what is this? And he said, All the Lights with Kanye. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. It's Friday Night Lights. And then I realized that I felt completely clueless by asking exactly that.
Speaking of lost and clueless, we bring on Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star.
That's exactly correct. Kyle Neddenriep joining us now from the Indianapolis Star. He will have all of your high school football coverage tonight. Kyle, how are you?
Doing well. How are you, Jake?
Man, I love it. And I'll tell you, it always takes me a couple of weeks to really kick into gear in terms of my thought process of high school football, because when it's really hot out, it doesn't feel like football season, right? And then obviously we're kind of in that transitional period. But tonight looks like, no matter where you live, if you have a free night tonight and you've got a couple of bucks in your pocket, and it doesn't take many of them, you should go out to a high school football game, because the weather tonight is going to be absolutely perfect. And there's some big games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been lucky this year. I think last week was probably the hottest week we've had on a Friday night. And it was a little steamy, but not terrible. But usually, those first couple weeks can be pretty brutal. So it's been a good, knocking on wood here, but a great weather season so far. So, and another one on, like you said, on tap for tonight. Yeah, I'm going to be at Decatur Central. The Hawks play Plainfield, which is Plainfield is number 3 in 5A and undefeated up to this point. So that's a big mid-state game. Brownsburg and Westfield, a rematch of the state finals last year in 6A up at Westfield tonight. That'll be a really good one. And then Indian Creek is at Tri-West, and Tri-West has Jack Sorgi, who is committed to Louisville, and I think that'll be a potential for a really good game as well. But those are just a few. There's a lot of good ones tonight on the schedule as we get ever closer to the sectional draw in a couple weeks.
Which is hard to believe, right, that we're closer and closer to that. But let's begin with this. The Colts, for example, are 3-0. Okay, and last night I'm watching Seattle. Seattle goes to 3-1. I'm like, wow, that's kind of a surprise. I don't think people thought Seattle would be where they are at this point in the year. From a high school football standpoint, tip the cap for me, if you could, Kyle, to a school that when you look at what they've done so far, you say to yourself, you know what, give them credit. I don't know how long this will last, but they're off to a good start, and they probably have exceeded expectation.
Yeah, and I think by this point in the year, you have a pretty good sample size of what that team's about, and I think there are a few of those out there, and one we've talked about is Carmel. I don't know that you can put them in a surprise category necessarily, but I think they had just the way they've played so far and how they have, come out. They won 3 games last year. I know there are reasons for that. There were, injuries and, probably games that they could have won, didn't. But man, I mean, to see them kind of hit the ground running, their only losses to Louisville Trinity, which is not ranked number 1 in Kentucky in 6A. So, they're a team I think that, may fit that mold a little bit. Another one I would say, in my opinion, if you're tipping your cap to somebody, is definitely Pendleton Heights. I know they lost last week to New Pal. That loss doesn't, mean it's not going to mean anything towards their tournament success necessarily. But they're 4-1. They were a 6-6 team last year, and I think they're going to be a team to watch, and maybe it's flying a little bit under the radar.
They're at Mount Vernon tonight, right?
Yeah, they play Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon's having a tough season so far. I don't know that that'll be a that's may not be a blowout type game necessarily, though, because Mount Vernon does have talented players also. But I think that's the job Jed Richmond's done there this year, and really throughout his tenure, they've had some good teams throughout his tenure there. But this could be a team they haven't been to they haven't won a sectional since 2011. I think this is a team maybe you're looking at who they play in the sectional, who they potentially could play, and there's definitely a path for them to get through there. Yorktown's good. Greenfield Central is still a tough team. Beech Grove has had some good wins early in the year. But I think that's a team that, maybe we're not talking about enough, or, that maybe just flying a little bit under the radar. And again, they lost pretty badly to New Pal last week, but everyone's doing that, this year. So, but I would say them, a couple. Indian Creek's another one. They're 4-1. Lapel may fit that, and also Avon, I think too, that the start that they've got off to, maybe another one who probably fits that category.
You mentioned New Pal, by the way. They are at Greenfield Central tonight. A lot of big games around the area. Noblesville, Franklin Central. We mentioned Carmel and North Central. I'm curious of this, Kyle, and I know that we have discussed with you before, and so I apologize for asking this again. I believe you told me this is season 16 or 17 for you. I'm going off the top of my head. Is that right?
I actually think it's 18 for me. Yeah, I have to actually do the math on that.
So the next time I ask, it'll be 19 because I'm always like
right.
1 or 2 short. But the reason I ask it, I'm curious of this, and I don't mean necessarily in terms of the passion for it, because I think that's been there all the way through, but stylistically speaking, or even just in quality of play, from the time that you arrived in Indiana, now working through the nearly 2 decades of covering high school football, how has high school football in Central Indiana grown or changed in the time that you've been here?
This change that I've seen in my time is the talent probably at the skill position, and not that there wasn't that before, but I think it's used differently now because more of the 5A, 6A, and even the smaller schools are predominantly running shotgun spread offenses, and that's not something even when I first started here, that was necessarily the case. There's some teams that did it, and it kind of became more, popularized by what the college game was doing, which I think translates more to, what high schools do than the NFL does for sure. And the NFL's even gone to more of that in recent years. So I think to me, that's the biggest difference. And now you will see, and I'll have a story coming on a kid next week from a school that kind of is more old school in their approach, and it was fun to go watch them. I won't say who it is yet, but it was fun to go watch them practice just because it was more of an old school style of game. But I think just in the off season stuff and what the quarterbacks do, the quarterback play it's really a high level. Even when you come into high school now, I think it's almost expected of you. Where I don't know that was always the case or has been the case, but I think there's just a lot of things done. And the good thing about football, in my opinion, is there's you can't necessarily play year-round football, so you do have some off season, you do have some, most football coaches will support their kids playing another sport. A lot of times that's track, which fits well with football, or wrestling, maybe both. So I think that's a good thing about football, but also you do see, I think, the skill position players doing other things that maybe have them, and also you can practice more now too in the off season with your high school. So I think just the overall skill level of the quarterbacks, the skill position players, and just the predominance, and the defenses are better too. So it's harder just to line up in the I formation and run unless you're just so dominant that you can do that than it used to be. So there's a lot more tactical things that are different, and also just the skill of the players, I think, is just better than it used to be.
Kyle, when you look around the area, let's go to the quarterback position, okay? I do think that has become a more cerebral position. It's always required to be a cerebral position, right? But I think it's become more understanding and more in vogue for players at a younger age to be able to look at defenses and process and know playbooks and, the things that you see the Mannings and the Bradys. I think that influence has trickled down now to the high school level, where by the time a kid's playing as a varsity player, he has known those are the things, those are the skills that he's going to have to master. So with that all said, can you give me a quarterback in the area, at no disrespect to others, but a player that when you watched him, you just said to yourself, that's a guy that just looks like he was born to be a quarterback. He's got the size. He clearly can process. He has shown a comfort level in the pocket and just an understanding. Any of them from around the area that jump out at you when I use that disclaimer?
Well, when you say it that way, there's one for sure, and he's the quarterback at Brownsburg, Oscar Fry, who was he was the starter last year. He did share time a little bit with Joshua Stevens, but he was kind of the guy as a sophomore even, and now watching him as a junior. Last week was the first time I'd seen Brownsburg play in person this year, and they ran the ball really well against Fishers, but I just and he even had this last year as a sophomore, but even more so now. But his awareness, his ability to, to read what's about to happen, to, hey, we need to hurry up and get this playoff before the quarter, and he's on top of it, just those sorts of things that, those are things that you watch on, Saturdays and Sundays that most quarterbacks, because they're in that position, handle that stuff really well. You don't always see that at high school, or you don't see, coaches maybe give their quarterback always, they don't want to put too much on their plate, obviously, as a high school kid, but he's one that I think he's just really cerebral. He's physically talented too. I mean, he's got Division I offers, and he's only a junior, but he's one that because I just saw him play, and just because I think he's that way anyway. His footwork and stuff, and he moves around the pocket. He's not a super mobile quarterback, but he's just really kind of the way you described that. He really fits that bill, I think, and he looks like he's been. And when you talk to him, it's another thing. He really comes off like he's an NFL quarterback. When you talk to him, he's just very, very polished, very, respectful of his teammates and the opponents and those sorts of things. So I think he's one that definitely fits that category.
By the way, one of the schools that I mention each and every week when we have on Kyle Neddenritt from the Indianapolis Star, Crystal House tonight taking on Shortridge. This is a battle of two teams the last 2 years, I believe, that we have kind of talked up on this particular radio show, Kyle.
Yeah, Shortridge, coached by Ron Qualls now, and if you remember, he used to coach at Heritage Christian, and he's had obviously a lot of success overall in his career. But and Shortridge, I say while we're talking about, they have a running back named Thomas Campbell. Had a really good year last year. He's off to a really good start again this year, and they've got back-to-back wins now, so building up a little bit of momentum, and they'll play after they play Crystal House this week. They play Attucks next week, and we covered Attucks' game last week. They're a very talented team, so that could be a game to highlight next week, Shortridge and Attucks.
Kyle, as we approach the halfway point of the high school football season, I know leading up to the start of the athletic calendar year, the IHSA votes on different rules. They instituted the one-time transfer rule. Now that the high school football season's coming to a close quickly, have you been able to talk to any coaches, athletic trainers, or any the school officials on what to expect? Because I would assume that most of these student athletes that you will see enter the quote-unquote transfer portal are going to be for your big-time sports, mainly basketball and football.
Yeah, I mean, we've there's a lot of we did a Coaches Confidential before the season where you kind of were able to give coaches confidential. They can say what they want, and we're not going to name them. And that was one of the topics we brought up, was the transfer, the one-time transfer. And I do think there are good restrictions in place. There's been some. This senior class kind of is caught in the middle of it all. They weren't able to really utilize this new change because they're seniors. So there's been some frustration over that part of it. But I think as we move forward, it's actually going to be a little bit more black and white than the old rule was, hopefully, as people kind of understand it better and what you're allowed to and not allowed to do. And the good thing I think is, it's a one-time transfer, so if you're transferring multiple times, it kind of reverts back to the old rule. So you're not, able to just kind of bounce here and there depending on what the circumstances are in your life. I think there's some lessening of restrictions based on what exactly the scenario is for that individual. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody's still kind of wrapping their arms around it a little bit or understanding what exactly it is. But we have seen, as you go through some of these teams, like, and a lot of it is younger kids, as freshmen and sophomores who move. So they're not even, sometimes even on our radar that much yet. They may not have even played varsity sports, and they may be going to a smaller school from a bigger school where they weren't playing. So there's been some of that too. So it's hard to know exactly how. It's been so early still in that process. So, but I think it's definitely going to be a factor. And I think as people kind of understand what it is a little bit more now, we'll I don't know if we'll see more of it, but I think it'll definitely be part of, definitely just part of the experience now.
Coaches Confidential sounds like a show I would have tried to catch late night on HBO back in the day, for what that's worth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we had some great answers on that, actually, and a lot of the problem I think is that there's a lot of things that count as undue influence or recruiting that you're not allowed to do. And I think people at first maybe thought, well, yeah, we can now recruit players. Well, you can't just go out and recruit players from another team. That's still not legal. So there's some that's some of the issues the coaches talked about.
Yeah, it gets pretty gray, right? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think you still need to have those guardrails. You don't just want coaches going out and recruiting your players and making you promises and things like that. I don't think that's not what this was intended to be.
So Decatur Central, where you are tonight, correct?
Yes, I'll be at Decatur. Looking forward to it. I haven't seen either of these teams in person yet, so looking forward to this game tonight. I think it's going to be high scoring. I think it'll be a fun game.
Plainfield and Decatur Central at DC, and be sure to look for the Eddie Garrison statue on your way in.
That's right.
Yes, exactly.
You'll know the statue. It's the one with 46 pounds of bronze in the head area and then 6 gold chains. That's the statue that's Eddie Garrison. Kyle, appreciate it as always, man. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right, Kyle Neddenriep joining us on the program. I mentioned that perhaps the Pacers will look a little bit different this year. We certainly know that from a standpoint of the personnel, but what about the style? Chad Buchanan elaborated on that. We'll let you hear from him next. I'm really fascinated by Daniel Jones. I don't think it's overly surprising that a change of scenery has just allowed him to really jumpstart himself here and play at a very high level for the Colts. And smart player, not turning the ball over and making just all areas of a step of a maturation that maybe he didn't have in New York or was not facilitated for him in New York. And I wanted to get deeper into why that is, and I thought who would be good at knowing that? And I thought, what about somebody that started somewhere and didn't get off to a great start, didn't find any consistency, and then went to stop number 2 in their career, and immediately their numbers skyrocketed, and they found stability, and they started winning games, and they went to the playoffs. And so I reached out to that former Colt and said, hey, any way we can examine this? And they said, yep, how about 1 o'clock on Friday? So that conversation just a couple minutes from now. But we talked about the Pacers and getting set for their season. Chad Buchanan talked about the fact that now without Halliburton and without Miles Turner, clearly they are going to look a little bit different. And yes, you would say that at times if you're going to Mathurin or say Jarris Walker, maybe that slows things down a little bit from time to time. The question for Chad Buchanan was, does that mean that by design with most possessions you're going to be a more physical team, or just on occasion depending on lineup? Here's Chad Buchanan yesterday.
You're losing a ball handler, obviously a primary ball handler with Tyrese. Now we'll be able to slide Drew over to do some of that responsibility, and that creates, minutes for other players on our roster that maybe don't do some of the same things that they're replacing. So, Coach Carlisle is a brilliant coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. One of his strengths is taking what's given to him and maximizing it. And I think you'll see us play, like I said, probably a little more physical style of game. We'll have the ball in the hands of some other players at times where it was Drew before. Now maybe it's in Benedict, or maybe it's more in Pascal or Aaron or Jarris, whoever it might be. There's opportunity for guys to kind of establish themselves of what they can do to help this team this year, but also moving forward. We're always going to be looking, long term as well. But I think, the thing you'll notice differently is probably we won't be playing quite as fast. But we'll still be pushing the ball, but it'll be a little more of a physical, probably execution type team this year.
I don't think that's a huge surprise, and what that allows them to do then is better probably assess and inventory, if you will, how they can work Benedict Mather and Jarris Walker into things and play a style that then becomes an additional card in the deck, if you will, for Rick Carlisle once you get Halliburton back and you go forward then, and I realize then we're talking 18 months from now. But interesting comments from him as well on Benedict Mathurin. We'll get to that later in the program. But when we come back, the rebirth of a quarterback from stop 1 to stop 2. A guy that went through it himself and can shed some light on what Daniel Jones might be thinking is next. I don't know this. But I suspect it. I suspect that there was a time that this song was blaring out of a tape deck on some car rolling into the parking lot at Washington Square on the way to get a Hot Sam back in about 1983 or 84, and Jeff George was driving. Listening to Journey after a Warren Central football practice and getting himself a pretzel before going home to watch Andy Griffith and Warren tape. That's my guess. He joins us now on the program. The former Colt, of course, Illinois and Warren Central quarterback Jeff George joining us. Jeff, how are you?
Good, Jake. How you doing?
I'm good. Is that an accurate description, by the way, that Journey might have played at Washington Square back in the day?
I mean, that's pretty accurate. You know me too well, but I mean, it's still to this day. I still listen to that music. And
yeah, you were like, wait a minute, what are you talking about back at Washington Square?
I know. Back in the day, it's still happening. I still go by there and wondering where it's at. Where's Eastgate at? It's Glendale. I miss all those days going to Hot Sam. I mean, that does bring back memories. And what was that store you always went in and you saw the posters and you were going through the posters and
Spencer Gifts.
Spencer.
Yeah. If you were lucky, there was a Heather Locklear poster that just got released, right? Those are the glory days. Hey, Jeff, listen, I wanted to ask you, and I appreciate the time coming on. First and foremost, before we get into, because there was a specific thing that I thought you'd be able to add, more than anybody in this town, actually, an expertise on it. But I know you watch football. I know you spend a lot of time watching it. So let's begin with just simply your thoughts so far on what you've seen from the Colts at being at 3-0 and what's jumped out at you.
Well, obviously the main player that's jumped out is Daniel Jones. That's without his play and without what he brings to the offense and to the team, the leadership. Not sure that they would be there. Although I'm a big AR fan, I think he's got a lot of upside to him. But in this system and with this coaching staff, with this type of offense, I think it's a perfect fit for what Steichen and the Colts want to accomplish. So it's exciting. Everybody's excited around here, especially after the Pacers and all the success that they've had, and the city's hungry to see the Colts be successful again, and what a great start they're on, and I think it all begins with the quarterback play.
So let's go back to this, and I've talked till I'm blue in the face about some of the challenges that were presented to you when you were drafted by the Colts, and we don't need to go over that. I think most people know that, just in terms of different offensive coordinators and different players you had around you and lack of protection, but in the 4 years that you were here, your highest yardage passing was 2,900 yards, 2,910 yards you had in a year. And then you go to Atlanta and you take off. And you go to Atlanta and you throw for 3,700 yards in year one. You go over 4,000 yards in year two. You combine for 47 touchdowns in those first 2 years. What was it, Jeff? And the reason I ask is because what's fascinating to me is to look at Daniel Jones and to say, okay, maybe he didn't get the footing that he needed in New York, but clearly in Indianapolis so far, there is a comfort level there, and there is just maybe a lack of pressure that allowed him to flourish. What was it about just a new start for you or for any quarterback that can be beneficial that allows you to really kind of take off and spread your wings a little bit?
Well, I think the main thing is to find a situation, a team, a coaching staff that believes in you, the type of system that they run here. It fits his style of play. They give the quarterback a lot of freedom at the line of scrimmage, and you have to be smart enough to understand coverages and fronts, and you have to know your offense like the back of your hand. You just have to be a coach out there playing, and what they allow him to do is what he's probably been doing, especially when he was back in college at Duke. I remember watching him play in college. My oldest son played at Pitt at the time, and it was a downpour rain, and it was just miserable. And he comes out and he throws for 450, I think, and 4 or 5 touchdowns. I had a couple of rushing touchdowns. And at that time, I remember telling my oldest son, Jeff Jr., that I go, this guy's pretty good. I mean, you're going to hear a lot from him. He's going to be a first round pick, and I thought he was great in college. So when the Giants picked him, I thought it was a great pick, but a lot of times that doesn't mean you're going to have great success at that team that picked you. So like for me example, coming to Indianapolis, it was great to come back home, play in front of family and friends and hometown and all that. But was it the right fit for me at the time? No, it wasn't. It would have been nice to be able to maybe play in the league for 4 or 5 years and have success. And if it didn't work out at the team I was at before, to come back to Indianapolis when they were good and finish my career out at that time. But, you need a lot of luck and a lot of, things just need to go your way. And when he was in New York, it just, with the new coaches coming in, coming out and trying to replace, a future Hall of Famer and Eli, having to deal with all that. It was just too much. And, I'm not sure anybody would have went in that situation and been successful. You had a running back at the time, Saquon Barkley, that was unhappy and wanted out. And, there's a reason why players want out of a situation. They know it's not good. So when you have a franchise player like your running back that is all world and he wants out of New York, there's something to be said about that. So I just don't think it was made for him to be very successful at New York. And he's fortunate to be able to get out there and get a fresh start. Coming to Indianapolis, media is not as big as it is there. And, it's he can just pretty much breathe and be himself and be that same kind of player that he was at college at Duke. And that's kind of what you're seeing. He's running around making plays with his legs. He's showing his athletic ability. He's smart. He's making checks at the line of scrimmage. He's got a strong arm. Teammates love him. And, a guy like that, can't help but be successful. So, I'm happy for him because I've been there, like you said. And when you see guys like that, good people, become successful, you can't help but be happy for them.
When you go, Jeff George is our guest. Like, for example, and I've always said this, oftentimes players, I think, get unfairly judged based on how and where they were acquired. So, in other words, when you were in Atlanta, and I say this only because, again, it's kind of analogous to the situation that Daniel Jones may be going through. There was so much pressure on you in Indianapolis because you were the number one player taken in the draft, and obviously your background in the city itself. But when you went to Atlanta, do you think that part of why you were able to really flourish was because just that microscope was off a little bit? And maybe Daniel Jones feels that same way, like you talked about, of, there's a difference in terms of what was invested in Daniel Jones by Indianapolis, and therefore he doesn't have that pressure bearing him down that would be tough for anybody. Is there some truth to that?
There's a lot of truth to that, and what he brings too, it's not like he's first, second year guy. He's an experienced veteran that understands, that's been through every situation you can go through as a quarterback, not just football, but off the field as well. When you don't have success early on, you really tend to isolate yourself. It's not just football. You worry about where you're going. People just look at you different. Heck, your teammates even look at you different because what the media and everybody puts out there and says about you, it's totally not true. But when they read that, other people they believe that. So you kind of like carry yourself a little bit in the facility. You carry yourself a little bit different. You're thinking, man, is this, does my teammate believe in me? Do my coaches believe in me? Does the ownership believe in me? And I would imagine he felt that way in New York, and I felt that way as well. But the main thing is he's a confident guy. He's had success in college. He knows how good he is. He has all the ability in the world. Like I said, not just passing the ball, but he has the mental part of it that you need to be a great quarterback. And he can run. He's mobile, and man, some of the plays that you see him make is some of the best that the best guys doing at that level. So whenever you go out and the first 3 games they played, and the first 2 games that you never saw the punter on the field, that's pretty incredible. To go down there, and I believe that's what the record was. The punter never played. Right. Am I right on that?
Yeah, 2 games didn't punt, and then they scored on their first 10 possessions, I think, something like that, or 10 straight, I should say. Yeah,
it's hard to score points in the NFL. So when you're doing that, you don't need your punter. that speaks a lot of what your quarterback's doing on the field. Is he's doing something right? And whether it's a bad play and he sees the blitz coming, or he's changed the protection, just knowing where everybody's at on the field, he's able to do that. So that's always going to be success. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the Colts. I'm happy for him, and hopefully they can continue.
What things, Jeff? You would know this better than anybody in town. I mean, you were a long-time starting quarterback in the National Football League. So when you're watching a game, I'm imagining that you're watching it through a different lens than, say, myself or most people. When you first saw from Daniel Jones, was there anything that you saw out of him that, and I know you like Anthony Richardson, that you were waiting to see out of Anthony Richardson that told you right away, okay, he's comfortable here. This is going to work. What does your trained eye notice that perhaps the average person does not?
Well, you just watch them, how they, they carry themselves in the huddle, how they walk up to the line of scrimmage, what you're looking for, your keys, you're looking at the safety, you're looking at the fronts. There's just so much you have to do that's going through your mind, and the clock's going down, ticking, and you have to get the play off at, at a certain time. So, it's just the way he handles himself out of the huddle. Excuse me, my car went off. You can still hear me.
Oh yeah, I hear you.
Okay, sorry about that, Jay.
That's all right.
So just how he carries himself. You can just tell he's in command of the offense, and players look at him in the eyes. You can see in the eyes that they're just looking at him, knowing that he's in charge. And if he makes a check, it's the right check. And not that Anthony Richardson didn't do that. I mean, I see so much upside to him and all the talent that he has, the arm strength, and obviously the running ability. I just don't think that he was coached right in the beginning. Whereas Daniel Jones just came into the league, just prepared, came from an offense to preparing him for the NFL. And, and AR just, I don't think, got the coaching that he really needs to develop into the great quarterback that he can be. But, man, there's just so much upside to Daniel. And, when you watch him and, even in his interviews, how he talks, how he is always picking up his teammates, always, giving credit to somebody else. And, it's just he's just a polished quarterback, not just on the field, but in the media world. And he just knows the right things to say and just how he acts. And, I'm just impressed. I'm impressed with the not just the football player, but the person every time I hear him talk.
Jeff, I don't think we've had a chance to talk to you, certainly, publicly, since the unfortunate passing of Jim Irsay. And I know everybody listening to this show knows what Jim Irsay meant to this town in terms of just his philanthropy and the different things he was involved in. He also was a guy that clearly was a huge believer in you. The story, going back to when he came and watched your workout at Illinois and said, we're going to make you the number one pick in the draft. What was your overall relationship with Jim Irsay, and just obviously your thoughts on the loss of Jim Irsay?
It was tough, just like everybody else. You feel all the stuff that he did for the city, but my relationship with him was really good. I wish, I've said it all along, he's probably the best owner that I ever played for. I just didn't get a chance to play for the owner that he became. We all knew that he was going to be great. He was he loved the players. He was always in the weight room lifting weights with everybody, and he was always praising whoever he drafted. Yeah, he was a big fan of mine, and it's just unfortunate that I just wasn't able to continue my career to play with him, because he was I played for a lot of owners, obviously, but out of all the owners I played for, nobody was better than Jim. So I just wish I could have brought a lot more wins and a Super Bowl or a championship to Indianapolis when I played, because he's one of those owners that deserve it. He deserved more than the one Super Bowl that they won. With all the talent that they had here and defense and all the offensive players that they had, they kind of reminded me of the Atlanta Braves back when the Braves were good, with all that pitching and Glavine, Maddox, and all those Smoltz, and having all the talent but only winning one world championship. And it would have been nice to have brought him more than one Super Bowl, because if there's any owner that deserved it, it was him. And we just weren't very good. I've said this all, and I've talked about it. We were just in that learning stage when I got here, and we just both on offense and defense, we just really weren't that good. And And you draft a rookie quarterback, like myself, and who had all the confidence in the world. But if you don't have, and I was part of it. I'm not blaming anybody else. But if you don't have a team on both sides of the ball and a team that an organization with an owner, and we didn't even have a GM at the time. So it was Bob Irsay and Jim, and so we were learning as we went. But they got good, and Jimmy was one of the best. And what a great family to see his daughters out there being involved as much as they are. I love that. I love hands-on owners, having them on the sidelines, and having Jim be a big part of it when he was there. It just made you as a player feel good, and you just couldn't help but win.
What is for any player, Jeff, for be it Anthony Richardson, be it what Daniel Jones had to in New York, A.D. Mitchell, whoever it may be, when you get into the NFL, I mean, aside from the obvious, which is the media, and as let's go back to it, I guess, this way. When you talk about just being a leader, being, like Daniel Jones appears to kind of have the command and the presence of his teammates, is that a learned skill? The guys just either have that or they don't, or do you kind of learn it through experience?
A little bit of both. The way you carry yourself is leadership. But, I've said this, I think I said it last time we were on. For a quarterback, when you come into a system and from college to pros, you need to have a young nucleus around you. You really can't have a veteran-dominated team because those guys just look at you different. It's hard to lead as a 22-year-old kid. It's hard to lead a 32, 35-year-old guy and say, "Hey, follow me." I know, I know what I'm doing. We're gonna win. Just follow me. I have the map for that. Guys don't really buy in. They're like, "Yeah, okay, rookie. You're 20. Just sit tight. 2-3 years down the line. Let's figure this out." But if you got a young group of an offensive line, receivers, defensive guys that are 2-3 year veterans, and you're coming in as a rookie, it's easy to lead those guys. It's easy for those guys to follow you. It's easy, to come in there and you feel like this is really my team. You're in the weight room, and with all these young guys, you're not just football, but you do stuff off the field. You do in the off season. You go to all the Pacer games. You go to dinners. You go to bowling. All guys have foundations nowadays, and you do a ton of charity work together. It's not just the season that you're together; it's the whole off season that you're together as well as the season. And that's kind of how you just build chemistry, and that's the way it is in college, high school, college. You kind of grow up together. You go through some ups and downs. You win and lose together. But if you're trying to lead a 22-year-old quarterback, trying to lead a 35-year-old guy, it's kind of hard. And that's kind of what I felt like my experience here in Indianapolis was. I felt like there just wasn't a lot of young guys that we came in together that we could grow together. We had 2 or 3 guys, but we were a veteran-dominated team that, I felt like half the guys came from Baltimore. And, I was watching them play as a kid. And so it's different. So to answer your question, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but I think it's easier for a guy like Daniel Jones to come in that's been around, that's played 4 or 5 years, that's knows the ups and downs when he was in New York, because nobody faces that type of pressure in New York, and then to be able to come to Indianapolis, it really is it's pretty easy. I would think he would say the same thing. If New York is nothing like Indianapolis, and I can just go out there and be myself. I can go to dinner. I can go to the grocery. I don't have to go to the grocery at 10:45 at night to get milk and cereal or whatever you get to watch Andy Griffith and those days. But but you can go at at 1 o'clock in the afternoon where people really, they may know you, they may not, but it's the little things that you just kind of take for granted that you can't do in certain places that you can do here in Indianapolis. So I know that he feels comfortable, and obviously his play is speaking for itself.
Have you watched Ted Lasso, Jeff?
I have not.
Oh,
Nope.
Let me tell you something.
Nope.
Let me tell you something. Of all people, Jeff George, of all people that I know, needs to watch Ted Lasso on Apple TV more than any person because it is basically 2025 Andy Griffith. It is Andy Griffith, but with a sports team. I'm telling you right now, if you start watching Ted Lasso tonight, you will have it done before the Colts kick off on Sunday. It's 3 seasons, and then you will say to me, you were right. I mean, it has the, you know how Andy Griffith, there's something you can learn in every episode. You know what I mean? There's just Andy Griffith gives you a little wisdom in every episode, right?
Right.
Same thing, man. I'm telling you, exact same thing. You will absolutely love it. My last thing for you is this. I know a lot of guys that played will have up on their mantle the helmets of each team they played for. In your case, it would be, the Colts, the Falcons, the Raiders, the Seahawks, the Bears, Washington. I don't think I'm missing anybody there. Did I miss anybody?
Vikings, you say Vikings?
Vikings, I say, okay, Vikings as well. And then just to the left of that, you would have Illinois, Purdue, and Warren Central. When you look over all those helmets, if you had to pick up one of them to be able to put it on and instantly put yourself back to when you played there that brought you the most joy, it would be which helmet?
Yeah, you're not going to believe this, but the Warren Tomahawks.
Before Warren.
My 5th and 6th grade travel ball, Warren travel ball. You're a kid. You're just out there. We were pretty good and played with all the guys that I played with in high school. Obviously, I think whenever you ask a football player, what was the best part or best time of your life when you played football? And I think almost everybody would say high school. Friday Night Lights. That's the best. College is great. You're there for 4 years, and but it's more of a it's not high school. And then the pros, it's a business, and you have your ups and downs, and pros are great. NFL is awesome, but for me, when it all started, honestly, I mean, this sounds crazy, but I was a Warren Tomahawk in 6th grade, and we went, made it to the final game, and to this day, I can still remember every pass, incomplete pass, because we threw the ball a lot in 6th grade, and for me, as well as high school. So to answer your question, my Warren Tomahawk helmet, which I don't know where it is to this day, I probably don't have it, but the high school as well, Warren Central, put that helmet up there where it all began, where it was all innocent. You were just a kid, and you just go out there and then just played with all your buddies that you grew up with, playing out in the yard, side yard, backyard, coming in at 10, 11 at night when it's, mom's calling you to, hey, you got to come on in. Hey, give us 5-10 more minutes. We're almost done. You know what I'm talking about? As we talk about that all the time.
The best.
Just when that's when it was just fun. So
who beat the Tomahawks when you got to the final? Who beat you?
The Greenwood Woodchucks. They came up with some AA gap. It was like, in the teens. It was teens. I couldn't feel my hand. Lance Shive's dad was our coach. He's yelling at me saying, "You got to hold on the ball. My hands are frozen. I couldn't, I'm telling him, let's try and run the ball a little bit. We're throwing it 40, 50 times in the 10-degree weather. And I think we got beat. I don't even think we scored, 7-0, I believe it was. But they kept coming with a blitz, through a AA gap blitz, and we're little 6th graders, and we had no idea how to pick it up. And I'm taking one step, getting hit and getting sacked, and not really sure, thinking to myself, man, maybe I need to play baseball. I can get into baseball. So I think that's how I became good in baseball, because I wasn't sure whether I liked football or not, because I got hit too much in Little League.
Damn those woodchucks. That's all I got to say.
Those darn Greenwood Woodchucks.
That's right. Jeff, appreciate it as always, man. Great perspectives. Appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you again.
Sounds good, Jake. Anytime. Thanks a lot.
Jeff George joining us on the program, the former Warren Tomahawk and Indianapolis Colt. Kevin Bowen will join us coming up just a couple of minutes from now. We'll get the latest on what he's hearing from the Colts in terms of who's in and who's out for Sunday. By the way, about an hour from now, Franciscan Health, good for the heart. Stephanie White going to join us coming up top of the hour. Fever in action tonight in Vegas. Thanks to Jeff George for his perspective. I thought it was really good perspective about Daniel Jones and just maybe the ease of that pressure from being able to change scenery from the expectation coming into the National Football League. Joining us now in the program, you hear him each and every morning along with James Boyd and Jeff Rickard on the Fan Morning Show, Kevin Bowen. And Kevin, let's begin with this from a Colts standpoint. I think it's safe to say, and I don't know if official word has come out yet on the availability of a couple of players. So you tell me if, especially Kenny Moore, Alec Pierce, do we know more than we did say yesterday?
Yeah, Kenny Moore out for Sunday. Still, they still are saying a no injured reserve. So that's, I guess, good news. So basically, thought there is, should return, I guess, in the next, 3 weeks. Injured reserve has to be at least 4 games. Alec Pierce is out, and then Matt Gonzalez, their starter right guard, is also out. So first O-line shakeup of the year. They'll go to Dalton Tucker, who did start, I think it was 7 games as an undrafted free agent last year.
Yeah, so let's go to that first off in terms of that right guard, because that is an area of the line that a year ago they started to have to play around a little bit with depth there, right? Your thoughts are just your overall, with Tucker, how big a drop is that when you go there? I know you said he's had some reps, but what do we look towards in terms of the vulnerability there now on that side of the line?
Yeah, I think as he played last season, he looked more like an undrafted free agent. And so if you remember, they really shuffled that right guard spot a lot as the year moved along. Once Will Fries got hurt, I think Fries got hurt in like week 4, week 5. Tucker started for a while, and then, remember they got Mark Glowinski at one point. So they really feel like Tucker's made a jump, though, from year 1 to year 2, and I think I'm putting a little bit of words in their mouth, but I think they feel decent about him, being called upon. So be curious that the Rams don't have the most household defense, certainly not, Donald and Von Miller and Jalen Ramsey from the Super Bowl, but they still have a pretty good defensive line, even though the names might not be super common. So I do think it's something to watch. Again, offensive line-wise, like I said, it's the first time they've had to change up that group. So definitely something to watch for on Sunday.
Kevin, which team right now do you think league-wide there's more question mark about? I mean, question mark in a good way. In other words, between the Colts and the Rams, if you were to just survey, a big NFL enthusiast living in Dallas that has, a completely neutral observer, which of these two teams do you think is more intriguing as to who they truly are?
Oh, I think it's definitely the Colts. I mean, I think people will go with the Hall of Fame quarterback and the Super Bowl winning coach more than they would go with, 3 games to Daniel Jones and, Shane Steichen, I guess is whatever he is, slightly above 500 head coach. Now, if you want to really get into the weeds of these 3 games, I mean, the Colts have probably been the more impressive team. I mean, the Rams, struggled with Houston and then pulled away at the end, got a huge fumble late. They even struggled with Tennessee a little bit. And then, last week was really kind of a tale of 2 halves for those that watched their game with the Eagles. They jumped all over Philly early, and then Philly made the roaring comeback, and then the game ended on that blocked field goal. So, yeah, I mean, I would say Stafford McVay. I mean, you're going to bet on them more than 1 month of Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen. But if you really, and I get the Colts have played, probably the easiest schedule in the NFL. I don't know if that plays out, but 3 teams that are combined 1-8. So, I would guess people would say Stafford and McVay.
The Daniel Jones play, Kevin, I'm fascinated by this aspect of it, and that is the fact that, I think one of the more underappreciated aspects of this, we don't talk about it enough. We can talk about it every hour, and I don't know that we're talking about it enough. The way that they're taking care of the football, and they just simply are not turning the football over, and they are, so efficient offensively. Is that because, and I've asked a lot of people this, but in your mind, is that because Shane Steichen is brilliantly able to pick plays that he feels don't expose any limitation of Daniel Jones? Or is it that Daniel Jones has a level of play that allows Shane Steichen to further open his playbook and feel comfortable with whatever it is he wants to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a little bit of both. I think Shane definitely as a play caller, has kept the Colts away from, I guess, less than favorable situations. But, and I know I've said this a lot, and you and I probably have this discussion at some point in the morning show. I think one of the better Peyton Manning quotes out there, and he says this quite often in the Manning cast, is a huge part of the quarterback's job is when you recognize you're in a bad play, either A, get out of it, or B, don't make it any worse. And so for Daniel Jones, is recognizing the bad play mean, hey, let me get to the Jonathan Taylor check down quicker. Those sorts of plays. But, when you think about the 3 weeks of football for the Colts, Miami dropped one interception. I can't recall many other times where I've said to myself, oh, boy, Daniel Jones got away with that one. Like that, oh, boy, that probably should have been a turnover. If you do that again, it's not going to end well. Like there haven't even really been many of those plays. So I think a lot of credit also goes to him of staying away, which is probably the biggest 180 from his NFL career, is that he has had too many negative plays. Again, there are some quarterbacks that are just boring. They don't do anything good. They don't do anything bad. There are some, Jameis Winston probably the biggest example of it, that they do a lot of good, but they also do a lot of bad. And for Jones to have walked that really fine line of doing good and then no bad, that is truly impressive because, again, he's had moments in his NFL career, but they've always been sprinkled in with the negatives, the turnovers, the sacks, and those haven't been there really at all through 3 weeks.
Kevin, the season so far, I have been really impressed by, and I know you have commented on this as well, the rebirth to an extent, or maybe the birth of Alec Pierce. And by that I mean, and I don't know if it was Alec Pierce, something he's done, if it's Shane Steichen, but they've been able to put him in situations of a different operating area than where we have seen Alec Pierce, and it's paid huge dividend. I realize that his health is in question right now. But are we about to see the same level of incorporation and diversity of A.D. Mitchell starting to present itself, where they're going to try to use him in different ways?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge A.D. Mitchell week. Last year, the one game Pierce missed, Mitchell, I think, played over 50 snaps in the game, which is a huge number for a wideout. So I would expect that to be the case. Obviously, Tyler Bourne's presence is there and wasn't there, obviously, last year. But, it might not look exactly the same as Pierce, but granted, you saw the Colts. They took a shot down the field to A.D. Mitchell in week 2 with Patrick Surtain, of all corners, one of the best in the league, in coverage on him. They took a shot last week down the field to him, and he drew a big pass interference penalty. So I fully expect A.D. Mitchell to play a lot, to be targeted a decent amount, and the opportunity should be there for him to have a career game. If there are some weaknesses to the Rams, their O-line's been a little banged up, particularly at guard, and then corner. They lost their best corner a couple weeks ago, and just in general, they're not the most physical corners. So I do think that is definitely an aspect where the Colts can take advantage of them. So, yeah, the staff continues to speak super highly of A.D. Mitchell when he's on the field. They target him a good amount, so Daniel Jones clearly feels a level of trust, which is not a word you would have used last year, with A.D. Mitchell. So, yeah, Pittman and Warren might be, more of the target guys, but still, I think A.D. Mitchell will play a lot and be targeted a decent amount.
Did I hear Chad Buchanan yesterday in a press conference acknowledge your Notre Dame Fighting Irish? Was that designed to you?
Yes, he did take a dig. Yes, yeah, I forget the exact wording of it, either about them losing or about them unable to guard anybody. Maybe both, but yes, he definitely did. Yeah, a little. Yeah, that was a little twist of the knife there. I was caught off guard, and I just stood there and just had no reaction and was stunned, and then thought to myself, "Damn, how quickly things can change with how people's perception of Notre Dame football." I
took it as a compliment that Chad Buchanan is listening to the station.
well, yeah, he strikes me as a P1 listener. A long drive from Westfield down there to the St. Vincent Center, and we know he's come on with John quite often there. So, yes, if we can get him one of those little Nielsen rating pagers, that would be wonderful. Because I think Chad Buchanan is one of the few people that listen religiously.
He commented last year at some point at one of the games that he liked my Why Not Indiana t-shirt, and then I thought it was probably a bad tactical marketing error that I didn't get him one. Right?
Oh boy, yeah. You dropped the ball on that, and I must say there was one point, and Mark Dyson got me all excited this week. Mark goes, "Hey, have you checked your desk for the shirt from Jake?" I go, "The shirt from Jake," and then I'm thinking to myself, "Boy, yeah." Now that I think about it, months ago, Jake texted me, "What is my shirt size?" And this is all during the Why Not Indiana craze, and I thought, man, what a nice gesture from Jake. He got me a shirt. That was super nice. So, and then I kind of forgot about it. And then Mark says it this week, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me go to my desk. Mark goes, check your drawers. I haven't opened the drawers to my desk in, I've worked there for 7 years, 8 years. I don't know if I've opened the drawers one time. I'm opening all the drawers. I'm looking under binders. I'm looking behind. I'm looking under the desk. I got no shirt. So Chad Buchanan and I, we got no shirt.
Listen, Mark will tell you the Shirt Fairy made deliveries. I'm not responsible. If it took you 7 months to finally grab it, I'm not responsible for it if it grew legs. That ain't on me.
Well, how about a heads up? Hey, FYI,
Maybe I just
Lord
assumed
knows
you're a
not
responsible
sitting
employee that uses your desk.
Well, Lord knows
Oh.
your desk is as dusty as any of the desks in that whole building.
I
there,
noticed
so.
for a glimpse behind the curtain for folks here. So we have here at the Fan, we have an office that has a desk for all of us. I mean, myself, you, JMV, we're all in the same area. And they came in and put new desktop phones on said desks, and I noticed that none of us have opened those out of the box yet.
Yeah, I know. It's obviously, I think all of us probably pot kettle black here. I think there's probably still pictures of you and Shannon's first date, me before kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
I think we're all kind of in the same boat.
I do think possible, Kevin. Now, here's the thing. You are and I'm not saying the name of any businesses or whatever else, but it is my understanding there may be the possibility of Why Not Indiana for IU football shirts coming out. So,
Okay.
I can do a make good for you, even though I know that Notre Dame your first love, but you went to Indiana, so that's cool, right?
Just FYI, he's grown a little bit since I last texted you, so probably X before the L instead of just L
Okay.
that I texted you.
All right, lastly, has the Sun made the pick yet this week?
No, I've got the helmet sitting out. I've been so bad about it. I've got to pick Colts, right? It's just a blue and a yellow. I mean, it's just all blue and the yellow stripe, right? It's two yellow stripes. Is that what the Rams helmet is?
The Rams change them a lot. You know what I mean? Which one are they going with this week? I don't know. They change them all the time.
We don't. We unfortunately we haven't gotten into modern NFL. We don't have all the helmet possibilities. We're not Or can you imagine picking which helmet Oregon's going to wear each week?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Spending half his $529 on Oregon helmets here. So yes, we have not done it yet, but I would assume he has won 2 in a row. I would assume he's going to stick with the Colts here, just because not a lot of attraction, particularly from a zoology standpoint, with the Rams helmet.
Fair enough. All right, Kevin, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the games, and we will certainly be listening 7 o'clock Monday morning to the Fan Morning Show and recapping everything that happens this weekend.
It is an awesome sports weekend. You boys have a great one.
It is indeed that. Kevin Bowen joining us on the program. Stephanie White going to join us coming up top of the hour. We come back. Chad Buchanan said more about the Pacers in terms of their offense that I thought was very telling about something that happened over the course of last season, involving a guy that's going to be very important for them. We'll play it next. We're rolling along here quickly on a Friday. Awesome sports weekend ahead. Kevin Bowen, thanks for the time. If you're just joining us,
Where have you been?
then you did not hear that Kenny Moore II has been ruled out for the Colts. Did he say, no word still definitively on Alec Pierce, correct, Eddie?
Out.
Out, and then also a shakeup on the offensive line.
Matt Gonzalez is dealing with a toe injury. He is out. Did not practice at all this week.
So Tucker will be there on the right side of
Dalton
the line.
Tucker, not
Dalton
Tucker Barnhart.
That's right.
Very important distinguish.
Fever in action tonight. Stephanie White joining us about 10 minutes from now. Also at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, that is the home arena of the Indiana Pacers, who are getting set for Media Day coming up on Monday. But yesterday, Chad Buchanan, their general manager, meeting with the media and just kind of talking about where things stand right now. Obviously, we know Miles Turner in Milwaukee. Tyrese Halliburton will be out. Pascal Siakam presumably becomes a focal point, as he already was, of the offense. But Rick Carlisle has made no bones about the fact that Bennedict Mathurin will be a starter, and Bennedict Mathurin will be another player that they are heavily reliant upon. Interesting comments from Chad Buchanan yesterday regarding Bennedict Mathurin. Eddie, hold on. Let's do this again. And
Sorry,
see. We're going to play lottery here
Yeah.
to see if Eddie hits Chad Buchanan button or music button. Which
Bang the
one do you
drum
want to
all
go with,
day?
Eddie?
We bang the drum all day, or we want Bennedict Mathurin?
That's right. Chad Buchanan, this is not Todd Rundgren, I promise.
We need Benedict to play his style that suits his strengths, but we need it to help us win. You know, finding that balance of doing what he does well, but within the team frame of what we need him to do for us to be successful. Because you don't want, you know, not that this is Benedict, but there's players who are going to look and see, okay, I scored 22 points tonight. I don't care. I don't look at the win or loss. I just know I played well. And that's not how Ben is. Ben wants to win, but we need his production, his play style to adapt to us that allows us to win games. And I think that's the challenge for a young player, is figuring out, okay, what can I do? And then figure out what can I do that helps us win. There's two separate things there, and we need the winning part to be part of Ben's, you know, approach. And I think he can do it. And I think there's things that he does that we need that we're lacking, and him figuring out when do I do that and when do I play within the system of what we're trying to do is a challenge for a young player. And that's what Ben's going through. And he's still a very, very young player, and his future is still way out in front of him. And we're excited to see what he can do with added, you know, opportunity this year.
I think that's a fascinating comment, because it's a little bit of a challenge to Bennedict Mathurin, or message to him, not as a knock on him. And I think that Chad Buchanan made sure to clarify that it's not a knock. But one of the things about Bennedict Mathurin, and it's not his personality, I'm not saying that, but Bennedict Mathurin, who is a very talented player and a very confident player, and more than anything else, a very competitive player. But Bennedict Mathurin's strong suit as a basketball player is a more independently based suit. It is a more isolation-based skill set. And there were times last year in particular that when Mathurin came in, everything kind of ground to a halt, because if the ball went to him, it didn't stay within the flow of what they were doing. That is not a knock on him. That's just the reality of, at times, Bennedict Mathurin was an F-150 when you were actually in wide open interstate space and everybody else was running like a Ferrari. Thanks. That's the bad analogy, Senator Bennett. That's a fella playing the vacuum cleaner for fish, and apparently people found that to be music. But I do think it's interesting, though, when he says it needs to be within the frame, because I think last year what you saw in the finals, we saw the best and the worst of Bennedict Mathurin in back-to-back games. He saved them a game. There's no doubt about it. Game 3, Bennedict Mathurin, I think it was Game 3, Bennedict Mathurin was the one that delivered them a win. He came in and he got to the free throw line and he was aggressive, and it was fabulous. But he also then turned around, and in Game 4, when they had the 7-point lead, and he came in and he got 2 off-ball fouls and he missed several free throws, and Benedict taketh, Benedict, giveth, Benedict taketh away. I mean, there was a little bit of that. And for him to say, it's like Chad Buchanan was basically letting his subconscious speak there in the form of, we need him to better play within the parameters of what we are and who we are. We need him to understand the better mix and mesh of the style in which we are playing. And I think there's a yin and yang there that, by his own admission, they are still navigating through to figure out that fair balance. But I think you could hear right there that there still was the back of the mind presence of, we're still figuring out whether or not that is a style that can benefit us.
You think the style that they're, discussing, more physical, a little bit slower, can benefit him? And
yes.
It is to benefit him mainly?
Here's the thing. It is out of necessity, because now without Haliburton.
Yeah, because there's no one-to-one replacement for Tyrese.
And without Turner, you now have to shift your offensive focus to 1A being Siakam, which it always kind of was, but Siakam is a low-post isolation player. And then if you don't have Haliburton and if you don't have Turner, obviously, and you know that this year is about the development and the being able to see what you have in Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin, because you already are going down to Siakam a lot, and that's going to lead to a lot of isolation on the post, that means that you can slow down the game to truly assess what those two guys are. And also, I think it means that if those other two guys that we mentioned were actually returning, then we're maybe not even having this conversation because it's not as relevant. But that's what this year is going to be about. Stephanie White joins us next. I feel like we've regressed in the musical selections. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we had this great common ground in the beginning with acts, and then with each week, the music that we've allowed Coach Stephanie White to pick for us, we've regressed. So it makes me wonder what the next one would be. I mean, how close are we getting now to, like, Milli Vanilli? Pretty close, right? She joins us now on the program. Fever in action tonight. It is Game 3 of the WNBA playoffs with Las Vegas. Coach, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Did you like Milli Vanilli? I'm well, thank you. Did you like Milli Vanilli?
I wasn't really a Milli Vanilli fan, no.
Yeah, I was going to say. That's a little before your time, admittedly. But
a little bit.
Okay, I want to begin with this. And before we get into, and there's plenty to talk about and get to, and I know that you talked about it, obviously, answered some questions and publicly did, but I wanted to give you the opportunity here because since we last talked to you, we know of the passing of Nancy Leonard, who was just an absolute pillar in terms of sports in this town, clearly in basketball in this town, and I would assume that you had plenty of interaction with, but just your overall thoughts on the loss of Nancy Leonard.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. A pillar of sports and a pillar of this franchise, and especially from a female perspective as well. The leadership, the vision, the commitment. It just someone of her stature who we have had the pleasure of standing on the shoulders of, and now I think responsibility to continue the legacy.
I thought about this, Stephanie, and I want your thought on this. Oftentimes when you think about Nancy Leonard, one of the narratives, of course, is this female athletic, this female pioneer in sports, because it was such the anomaly, right, to have an assistant general manager that was a woman back in those times as the Pacers were transitioning from the ABA into the NBA. And while I understand the relevance of pointing out her gender because of the anomaly of that, then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, but it wasn't necessarily even about that. It was just about the fact of being a leader, regardless of, you know what I mean? Because she kind of transcended through that into simply face of the franchise, if you will. Now, is that selling short, or is that discrediting the things that she may have had to overcome earlier in her career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we look at it from today's viewpoint, we can look at it like that, but I do think it's short selling what she had to overcome to be in that position. Certainly I think we still have a long way to go in terms of women in sport, and especially women in what have traditionally been male sport dominated areas. And I think about this organization, Nancy Leonard. Think about the drafting of Ann Myers and the way that this franchise has embraced women in leadership position, and the way that women have been at the forefront of change, and starting certainly with Nancy Leonard, and then the commitment to continuing to see the vision it unfold. And I think from a leadership standpoint, yes, leadership in sport, leadership in community, understanding how to break barriers. And, we say it all the time in women's sports that if you can see it, you can be it. And she was one of the first.
The Fever in action tonight, taking on Las Vegas, game number 3. Let's talk about game number 2 and the fact that, and when I looked at that game, it seemed to me to be one, and it was interesting because you guys had a couple of different periods where you made runs, Coach, in that game. But at the same time, it seemed like there was a more passive approach to it than in game 1. Game 1, it was like they came out and said, we're taking this game, right? There was just a will there that seemed to drop a little bit in game 2. Am I being too critical an eye there?
No, I think you're right. I think some of it had to do with how Las Vegas came out in game 1 and in game 2. In game 2, they certainly came out like a team who's won multiple championships, who understood what it meant to be there, who had a desperation about them, as they should have, and as we should have in game 1. Certainly you don't want to come back to Indiana in a position where you're down 0-2. I think you saw their experience come through. We've got a group that's really not been through this before in terms of our core group, and I think you saw a little bit of lack of experience in terms of mentality what it takes consistently. And there's no substitute for experience, understanding the urgency of the moment, understanding that not just every step that you take in the playoffs, but every game moving forward in the playoffs requires a different version of yourself and your team. Sense of urgency continues to go up. Desperation, not the reckless desperation, but desperation in terms of understanding how important every play, every possession, every loose ball, every box out, every coverage is. And this we got knocked in the mouth, and we didn't have a response. We had our moments, like you said, where we could, but it was a little bit of a mirror image of game two. We came out the aggressor, and they were a little bit on their heels, and they made some runs, and we were able to make runs of our own to extend. And in game two, they did what they were supposed to do. And now, fortunately for us, we're back home.
When I look at this year in the WNBA, and there are wonderful players across the WNBA, and obviously, you see one of the best in Las Vegas, right? And Asia Wilson. But this year, and I know that not everybody can win an award, Kelsey Mitchell's the most valuable player in the WNBA. When I look at just what's happened this year and I think I say that, Coach, because of the different roles over the course of a year she has had to fill at different periods depending on what it was you guys needed. It seems to me like she's been able to fill each and every void that has been asked of her. At what point this year did you see in her perhaps even that elevation of game to the point, and she's been a great player, I don't mean that she didn't have that to begin with, but when did you see this year where you thought to yourself, this is another level for her?
I think at various points, but certainly, when we were at Chicago, I know we were without Caitlin. I can't remember, who else was not playing at that moment. When we were playing at the United Center, and she just took over the ball game in the second half. In Connecticut, when she just took over, she has these moments where she just can take over the ball game. And then when we lose, Sophie, who was kind of our third, fourth backup point guard, and then we asked her to start playing a little bit more primary ball handler, more point guard. And this comes with more decision making. It comes with more facilitating. It comes with more responsibility. And she just continued to get better and continued to shoulder that responsibility and elevate her game from that standpoint. And then as we headed into the playoffs, a position that she'd only been in, last year for the first time in her career, and her leadership really started to come through, and her taking accountability and holding one another accountable, her communication, just different areas that she's continued to grow. She's always been a great player, and she's always been a terrific scorer. And I think that at various points this year, and certainly as we've made this playoff run, you've seen her playmaking and her leadership.
Steph, how has your relationship with Kelsey grown from when you were hired, when you started out trying to convince her to come back to the Indiana Fever, to now where she arguably has been one of the best players in a season in the Fever history this year?
Our relationship has continued to grow. I know that she knows how much I believe in her, how much I trust her. I could speak from the outside when we were trying to bring her back, just how excited I would be to coach her, and how much we want to put her in positions to be successful and put her in positions to do some things with this franchise that she hadn't done and we hadn't done in a long time. And I think that she knows that I trust her, and I do, and I trust her as well. She is just, the thing about Kelsey Mitchell is that she just wants to play ball, man. She is just somebody who just loves the game. She doesn't get caught up in all of the things, that are a part of being a basketball player in this league. She just wants to hoop, and that she's the ultimate competitor in that way. And, we've continued to layer things for her. And so I think her trust in us and certainly our trust in her has just continued to grow. But I absolutely love her. She is one of the best human beings around. She is one of the hardest workers, that I've ever been around, and she is one of the ultimate competitors.
By the way, when's the last time you just hooped? When's the last time you just went out and played?
I don't know, Jake. What, 20 years ago, maybe? It's been a long time.
Honestly, do you ever just pick up a ball and nobody's around? You're like, you know what? I'm just going to put up 150 shots.
I'll put up some shots. I don't think it's 150 anymore. And every once in a while, I will go out there with the kids, but now they're getting too big and strong, so I'm not trying to get hurt.
Well, just wait till you're my age, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh. I think I told you I was playing pickup ball, and this is probably 8 years ago, and I go for a routine putback I've done 1,000 times, and just when I'm about to basically lay it back in, this young buck comes up. I look over and I see like knees elevating above me for a put, and I'm like, "That's it." You know what I mean? That's it.
I'm done.
You know when you got to be done, right?
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
I don't know why or where this came about in this postseason run, Coach, but I've seen a lot in the last couple of days of people saying, wait a minute, there's this weird language within the WNBA rules of when a player's out that they're still eligible in the postseason, and that means that Caitlin Clark can still play, especially if they get in the finals, et cetera, et cetera. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know anything about that language. I haven't had one thought on that. I have not seen anything about that, so it's the first time I'm hearing it. But no, I mean, Caitlin Clark is out. Caitlin Clark is again priority, long-term health and wellness, making sure that she's ready to go and ready to be healthy for our team a year from now. Well, not a year from now, but for next season.
Correct. So she is. There is no situation where she would play in the remainder of this year, regardless of how many games are left.
Well, I mean, I cannot foresee. I don't like to use the words always and never, but there's not a situation that I could absolutely foresee.
Fair. Somebody asked me this question, which I think is a good one, and I know that there's still basketball left to be played, and I want to get into, before we let you go, about tonight, what things we might anticipate. But I think it's a good question. When you look at the number of players that you have been able to utilize this year, and the players that were not on the roster at the beginning of the year that have found themselves there now because of attrition, is there one that jumps out at you where you say to yourself, boy, if there's a way to keep them long-term and get them on the roster beyond just this short window, I'd love to have it? Who would that be?
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know. That's a tough question, especially because pretty much, most people on our roster are going to be free agents anyway. But, I think the thing that we've continued to learn, and I think those of us who have been in this game a long time, know is that you got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right? And, I think Odyssey Sims has been a difference maker for us when she's aggressive, and she's hunting, shots and hunting opportunities at the rim. We're a different team. Shea Petty is the ultimate, leader, teammate, guy who can come in and make an impact, and a player who can make an impact in our locker room and on the sideline. And Ariel Powers, same. It's like her energy to be able to come in at the point that she came in, and really impact our team in that way, give us some things that we needed, we missed without the size that we had on the perimeter. I mean, every single one of them has played a vital role in us getting to the point, that we are. I think it'd be tough to say if there's one that you absolutely, have to have, because they've all been so important to what we're doing.
How have you changed as a coach from the last time, over the course of, it's hard to believe that it was 10 years ago before you came back to coach this franchise. When you look at where you guys are now and some of the things you've had to navigate, you've handled that differently now than you would have, say, 10 years ago. In what way, if at all?
Well, I think number one, life experience. You understand that you got to play the hand that you're dealt, number one. But number two, maintain perspective, keep it in perspective. So maybe 10 years ago, I would have been caught up in what we don't have instead of really reprising and rethinking about what we do have and how we can make that work. I think the other thing is just learning that I have to adjust to what our team needs from us. And whether that's, energy, whether that's, being a hype man, whether that's, as much as X's and O's, it's also about presentation and production, and what they feel from me is as much as what they see from me. And so, the different players need different things. And so I think my ability to adjust and be flexible to what they respond to, as opposed to just being rigid in how I do things, I think that's changed. And I think it impacts different players in different ways. And certainly I think, from my standpoint, learning what that is, and it's been different at various points throughout the year too, and being flexible and being able to adjust to that. But I think more than anything, it's just understanding that we've got to control what we can control, and how we put one foot in front of the other, and how we approach the day-to-day, in terms of putting the players that we have on the floor in a position to be successful. And maybe 10 years ago, I might have got caught up in some of those things that we couldn't control, and had not been or would not have been able to lead a group like this in the way that I am now.
And the response that you would like to see tonight in terms of what's going to tell you early on how the night's going to go would be what from your team?
I want to see us be aggressive. I want to see us attack the paint. I want to see us get to the rim, get to the foul line. I don't want to see hesitation in taking shots, in decision making. I want to see, active and aggressive, dictating on the defensive end of the floor. I want to see that energy. I want to see that attention to detail. I want to see that fire, competitive fire that our team has shown, all season long. Look, I mean, the reality is the pressure's not on us, right? Like I want them to go out and I want them to play hard. I want them to play together. I want them to play free.
It's pretty special, though, isn't it? I mean, it's an awesome night outside. It's a great sports calendar. It's a great time in Indianapolis. Chad Buchanan talked yesterday about the fact that winning has become contagious amongst the franchises in this town and the collegiately and everything else. It's going to be a pretty big atmosphere down there tonight. I know you've got to be excited about it.
I'm absolutely excited. This city has been waiting a long time to have playoff games in our home arena in the WNBA calendar and WNBA season, and now being able to do it in the semifinals is a huge opportunity. We know that they're gonna show up. We know that they're gonna show out, and we're gonna lean on them, to give us that added edge, to give us that added adrenaline tonight.
Coach Stephanie White, appreciate it as always. We look forward to talking to you again. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Best of luck tonight, Coach Stephanie White. Game number 3 tonight between the Fever and the Las Vegas Aces, and I think that's an important aspect of it. Just the aggression, having to come out, set a tone early for the Fever, and we shall see what happens with that. I think the same can be said, truthfully, for the Colts coming up with the Rams. We'll give our predictions before we end the show, and we hand it off to John on what we think may happen there. We have not talked much about the college slate of games. I think for Indiana, an interesting matchup in Iowa, just because of the fact that, you keep saying to yourself, okay, well, let's test Indiana this week. Maybe Illinois wasn't as good as we thought. Let's see what happens now in Iowa, in a tough place to play at Kinnick Stadium. Eddie, I don't see with that group and the way they're playing, and it starts with Curt Cignetti. I mean, it really does. A year ago, you kept waiting for this reality to kick in for Indiana before it finally came to the epiphany of maybe the reality is that, in fact, this is who they are. They are this good, right? And so, and they are, a team that doesn't shoot themselves in the foot. And it wasn't until you got into, and I realize at Ohio State, that game, although I thought in the first half they looked pretty strong, and then obviously Ohio State, just the overall depth of Ohio State pulled away. The Notre Dame game, I think Notre Dame probably could have won that even more handily than they did, but keep in mind, I think that was the closest college football playoff game that took place. But, that the way that Cignetti carries that team, you want to talk about aggressive. That's kind of what they are, right? They come out and they get after you, but then they just do not let up. And before you know it, you're down 17. You're in a world of hurt. There's no reason to believe that confidence doesn't continue in Iowa.
It's the level of preparation throughout the course of the week and the business and professional approach that Curt Cignetti has that results in his teams being so successful.
Yeah.
He doesn't put up with any BS. He makes sure to buy into every single player. He coaches every single player throughout the course of the week. And even if they're in these blowout games like they were to start the season and against Illinois, there's always something that he finds to coach, whether you're a starter, whether you're a backup. And he's going to make sure that every single thing is discussed and every single thing is prepared for throughout the course of the weekend. This week will be a bit of a different test for them in comparison to Illinois, just because of how gritty and tough and physical Iowa is. IU struggled at points last year with just overall physicality in those two losses that you mentioned between Ohio State and Notre Dame. So this could be a solid test for them as they prepare to take on Oregon after the bye week. So that is the one thing that's good for IU, is that Oregon doesn't follow this game, so it can't be considered the quote-unquote trap game. So they can go out, take care of business against Iowa, have a week off to study some extra film on the Ducks, and then be prepared to go out west.
Purdue's taking on Idaho Lower East, so they will be back in action next week. Let me see who they got after Idaho Lower East. Illinois. Purdue taking on Illinois next week. They're on a bye week this week. Idle, as they used. I don't know if they still do that. It used to be at the bottom of your screen when they would roll the scores, and if a team was off instead of bye, it would say idle.
When ESPN does their top, I think they do like a top 10 graphic on like the Saturday night game on ABC, and if one of those top 10 teams is not playing, it says idle.
It does say idle?
It does.
Okay. And then Notre Dame taking on Arkansas. I was surprised by this. The most surprising thing to me about Notre Dame and Arkansas.
What is the spread for that game?
That's a good question. It's in Arkansas, right?
Yes.
Pig suey. That's what they all say down there during the games. I'm going to guess. Boy, that's a good question. What's the spread? We're gonna test and see how strong I am on my Jimmy the Greek skills here. I'm gonna say Notre Dame by 7.5.
Boy.
I have no idea. So if I'm way off, just tell me.
You're a field goal off.
10.5?
4.5.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea. Here's what's interesting to me. Number one, I was stunned to see these two teams have never played. I would have guessed for certain, like in the early 70s in the Cotton Bowl they would have played or, whatever, right? But I think Arkansas is tricky. I was talking about this with Jason Hammer because he's a big Tennessee fan, and they've got Mississippi State this weekend. And I was saying, the interesting thing about an Arkansas is that sometimes Arkansas can be tricky for a Tennessee or a Georgia or an Alabama or a Texas because when they've got Arkansas on their schedule, it's surrounded by a Tennessee or an Alabama or a Georgia or a Texas. So you kind of overlook Arkansas. And they're not incompetent, right? I mean, it's a decent program. Now, they got new coach. I think they have a new coach.
No, Sam Pittman's still there.
Okay. Sorry, Mississippi State is the one that has a new coach. We were talking about Mississippi State as well. But when you look at Arkansas for Notre Dame, who they do have a better schedule this year than in most years, and it's not their fault that Boise State's, I think, a little down. But this game's kind of been one of them that's jumped out at you on their schedule of, yes, they had the big two to start out with the two games they opened with Miami and A&M. But then they were well aware of Arkansas. So I don't know that you overlook Arkansas like some of the SEC teams kind of do, and that's where Arkansas can sneak up and be dangerous for you. It's a tough place to play, and I don't know much about the way they play this year. But I do think that the Irish are very, very good. And, I mean, I'm stating the obvious here. They're a top 25 team, even with those two losses. I think they have two, not one, but two dynamic backs that if they get a lead, they just become tough to play against.
Notre Dame, you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Which Darian Price and Jeremiah Love?
And Price has been, to this point, I think, more dynamic than Love. Love has been such a good back over the course of his time there.
Well, I think there's just so much focus on whenever Jeremiah Love's in the game. Like, that is the one guy you cannot let.
You're right. But Price, though, Eddie,
crazy.
his ability, he had a run, Price did, against Purdue where his ability to cut and immediately pop to the outside, to me, I was like, okay, that guy is in fact different. I'm not saying, Love is what Love is. But I think they've gotten better play at quarterback also than you would expect for a team that has a quarterback that young.
Jadarian Price has 5 rushing touchdowns on 27 carries. Every 5th time he's carrying the football, he's in the end zone.
And some of those are, we're not talking like 1 yard plunges.
And he's averaging 7 yards a carry.
Marion and Indiana Wesleyan, that's at 1:05, I believe, tomorrow.
That's a big one.
That is a big one over at Ascension St. Vincent Field, Marion on the near west side. And Indiana Wesleyan has had their number. I mean, they've beaten them 4 times in a row, and that's a matchup of two teams both ranked within the top 20 in their division. Where is UIndy this weekend?
That's a great question.
I'm looking it up right now. Did you go to a lot of games? You did the games, right? Did you call the games when you were there?
I sure did.
They have a conference game, obviously. That goes without saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling it up right now. UIndy Greyhounds, you're kind of disappointing me here as an alum.
I love this press box, and I love that stadium.
They are in Truman, Kirksville, Missouri. You would assume that Truman would be named after who, Eddie?
I I don't know, Jake. You tell me.
I'm going to assume that would be Harry S. Truman, since he was from Independence, Missouri, and this is in Kirksville, Missouri, which I believe is the St. Louis area, I think.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
But I'm going to assume that Truman is named after Harry S. Truman. And the S, I believe, is just S. Pretty sure there's no, like, middle name there, for what that's worth. That is 2:30 tomorrow, and the Hounds coming in off a 47-19 win over McKendree. They
That was
are
a homecoming game for them.
3-1. Were you there?
I was not.
Were you honored?
No, not this year.
Really?
Not this year.
Next
Not 2 years in a row.
Somebody asked if you would be honored at homecoming. They said, nah, he'd probably get too big-headed. And they said, well, obviously he's already gone through that once. Isn't that what happened there?
Yeah.
It is a Friday. It is approaching the bottom of the 2 o'clock hour. You know what that means. It means time for a feel-good, good for the heart Friday from Franciscan Health. $49 heart scan. I actually just had my blood pressure taken. I used to do this daily. I'm always uncomfortable with the tightness on the cuff, to be honest with you, but got back into the swing of doing it daily. And I know that all of us have a general idea what those numbers mean, but also if you are experiencing issue with blood pressure, what can be done aside from just, say, medication that might be able to help out your blood pressure, and just how important is it? We're going to have that discussion coming up in just a minute. But a reminder again, $49 heart scan from Franciscan Health. It is the first step towards that peace of mind when it comes to your heart and making sure that you are on the right path towards cardiovascular health. In particular, if you're over the age of 40, if you've dealt with obesity, if you are a current or former smoker, any of those, the Franciscan Health $49 heart scan is so important. And, of course, you can pay out of pocket when it comes to the heart scan. It is non-invasive, takes about 10 or 15 minutes. Obviously, you've got the appointment time and then get in there, but it is not a hard thing to do. And with it comes a peace of mind. And with each and every heart scan from Franciscan, you get a heart health risk assessment, which is important as well. Gives you that reading of how much calcium is in your heart, and then you get kind of a roadmap on your cardiovascular health. Call 833-238-0688. That's 833-238-0688. Jake, I'm not going to remember 833-238-0688.
See, he can't even remember.
I can't even remember. Yeah. That's why you can always go to franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles, or simply Google Heart Scan Franciscan. It's that simple. But important conversation about those numbers that can be a little bit tricky next. For the Heart Friday that we do on the program, and we also, in that capacity, talk with different members from Franciscan Health about heart health. And this is, I think, today a really important conversation with Dr. Stephen Cook that we're going to have here, who is a non-invasive cardiologist with Franciscan Health. And because we're talking about something that really, I think, impacts and is relatable to, at least by term, about everybody when you talk about blood pressure. And everybody knows, yeah, okay, Jake, I go to the doctor and they put that thing on my arm and it's uncomfortable for a minute and then I get my blood pressure. But what exactly does it mean? And when do you know that you might be in a danger zone? We'll get to that and more with Dr. Stephen Cook, who joins us on the show. Doctor, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jake. Thanks for asking.
I want to begin with this. I think all of us know that when our blood pressure is taken, it gives two numbers, and oftentimes one of those numbers seems to be more important than the other, and we want to make sure they're not too high. But I don't know that many of us really truly understand what is being measured. In layman terms, for those of us that had to take algebra 7 times, can you explain what blood pressure exactly is that you're looking for?
Absolutely. Yeah, just to put it in, layman's terms or in general terminology, blood pressure is simply the force of blood pressure or blood pushing against the walls of the arteries or the vessels in our body. And, this is just a really simple indicator of our overall cardiovascular or our heart health. And looking at those two numbers, right, there's a top number and a bottom number. That top number, we're talking about systolic pressure. This is the pressure when our heart is contracting. And that bottom number we refer to as diastolic pressure, and that's the pressure when our heart is relaxing. And that gives us a lot of information when people are just even walking through the door into the cardiology clinic.
Dumb question, but is one of those two numbers more important than the other, or are we looking essentially at a 50-50 level of importance in terms of the reading?
No, I would say both those numbers give us a lot of equal information from both numbers.
Okay. And with that, doctor, let's begin with this. For those that are experiencing high blood pressure and, are looking at it and saying, man, I need to make sure this number is lower. I think obviously we know that, not smoking would be the first thing that one would want. But what are the little things that maybe people don't even realize that they can be doing to help their blood pressure that is an everyday thing that many people are unaware of?
Yeah, so really simple things that we can do, right? I always tell patients who have a history of high blood pressure or are newly diagnosed with blood pressure, even simple exercise, right? And what I like about exercise, it also helps us to lose weight. And those are two really important things that kind of can help us reduce our blood pressure. And there are patients that, young adults that really don't want to be taking medications. Or maybe there are other adults that are on many medications and don't want to add another medication to their regimen. So, even simple exercise, jogging, are really effective in lowering blood pressures. And even I think about people who, sit all day at their job, even lower intensity exercise like walking that may interrupt their sedentary time throughout the day can help them reduce that blood pressure. Other things that are helpful is looking at how much salt you take in through the day. The average American takes in about 3.4 grams of sodium or salt per day. This is terrible. Salt and water are best friends, and that increased water increases your blood pressure. So again, look at how much salt you're taking in. These are simple things to do. Exercise, losing weight, watching your salt intake. Those are just simple things that we can all be kind of, thoughtful about during our day-to-day activities.
What is a good target range, and has that number, with some things, doctor, as advancements go on or as time goes on, perhaps the measuring sticks or what we think is a safe range, at one period, maybe 20 years later, that does change. Has there been an evolution in terms of blood pressure of target numbers, or are we pretty static in terms of what are considered to be the ideal blood pressure measuring?
Yeah, I'll tell you something. These guidelines blood pressure guidelines for the prevention and evaluation and management for high blood pressure or hypertension are constantly under revision. They were just published or edited again just a month ago, okay? And they're getting stricter and stricter. So the definition of normal blood pressure is less than 120/80. And even elevations in blood pressure is now between that top number, 120 to 129. Patients who have stage 1 high blood pressure, what we call stage 1 hypertension, is now defined as a top number of 130 to 139, and that bottom number, or a diastolic blood pressure, of 80 to 89. And patients with really high blood pressure, what we define now as stage 2, is that top number, or a systolic blood pressure greater than 140, and a diastolic blood pressure greater than 90. And so we use these different categories to help us, our primary care doctors, cardiologists, to define who really would benefit from blood pressure medications. So it's getting more and more strict today.
Dr. Stephen Cook is our guest. He is a cardiologist with Franciscan Health. We're talking about blood pressure. Doctor, if your heart had eyes and it could see your plate, as you're, let's say you've got a big glass of water and your heart's happy about that, your heart is happiest when it sees from a blood pressure standpoint. It looks down at the plate and it sees you about to eat something, and the heart rejoices because it knows the blood pressure is going to read out a good number because you are ingesting on the regular basis what?
Yeah, so if I had to choose, so if I have a patient with pretty high blood pressure, one of the things that we would recommend, obviously first is going to be a low salt or a low sodium diet, a diet that is actually low in fat, high in fruits and vegetables, and a higher protein diet. This can really remodel that patient to kind of have a lower blood pressure. The other thing that I recommend, this is really difficult to do, is limiting your alcohol intake as well. And this is recommended by both the CDC and the American Heart Association. For women, it's drinking, less than 1 drink per day, and for men, drinking less than 2 alcoholic beverages a day. Now, let me clarify this. This is really, for our audience, this is for what is an alcoholic beverage. For beer, it's less than 12 ounces. For wine, that's 5 ounces. And for distilled spirits, that's 1.5 ounces. This is really minimizing your alcohol intake. And that should show you or demonstrate to all of us how significant alcohol can increase our blood pressure.
Okay, and then what about, I'm going to ask a couple of things, doctor, that I've heard can be good for your heart and for blood pressure, and I want you to tell me fact, fiction, or indifferent. Is that fair?
You got it.
Okay, yogurt.
So that is fact. That is excellent for high blood pressure in your diet.
Okay, oatmeal.
I would also say fact for that as well.
Okay, this one is not necessarily my favorite, but I've heard it, and I'm curious. Beet juice.
I'll go with fact. Fact. There's some, so beets is antioxidants, so that's going to be good for your overall cardiovascular health as well.
Any role in terms of, obviously if somebody has found out that they have high blood pressure, are there times, doctor, where you find that it is strictly genetic with somebody and the odds are just stacked against you, and then it becomes even more important to make sure that you are adhering to everything we're talking about?
Yeah, there's probably, you'll have patients that you'll meet where you'll take a history and they'll say to you, both my mom and dad had high blood pressure, my sisters and brothers have high blood pressure. So in that scenario, there's got to be an underlying genetic component to this as well. So I would be remiss if I did not take a family history, because you may find out that there's really nothing else going on, or you'll meet a younger patient, somebody in their 20s or 30s, and they just come in with this very resistant, difficult to treat high blood pressure, and then you find out, wow, everyone in their family has high blood pressure as well. So it's very important to take a family history.
Okay, before we let you go, Dr. Stephen Cook is our guest. He is a cardiologist at Franciscan Health, and we're talking about blood pressure. A couple of other things here. Number one, and that is somebody that may be experiencing a problem with high blood pressure but doesn't necessarily know it. They have that silent killer within them because they're not getting their blood pressure checked. are there symptoms that may tell them, in fact, this is something that they need to take a look towards?
Yeah, this is tricky, right? Because you bring up a really good point that this has always been described as the silent killer, because most of us have had high blood pressure and we don't recognize these symptoms. So there can be some subtle symptoms, whether or not it's chronic headaches, fatigue, shortness of breath. Some patients can show up with chest pain as, their first symptoms for more poorly controlled high blood pressure, and shortness of breath may come along those lines as well. So those may be some more symptoms that are present for long-standing hypertension that needs to be addressed by either your primary care doctor, or if the primary care doctor wants to refer to cardiology. Now, patients can show up with hypertensive emergencies where they show up with real severe headaches, with confusion, chest pain and tightness and weakness. So those are some really alarm signals to really look up for as well.
Once somebody goes on medication, if in fact it gets to that point, let's say they have those symptoms, they go in, they find out they have high blood pressure, they go onto a medication. I know there are medications for this. Does the medication just regulate somebody to the point where things are stabilized and then they go off the medication, or more often than not, is medication a long-term thing?
Yeah, I would think for most patients, medications become more of a long-term issue. I think that, and patients become better controlled once they're on medications and often feel better. I think that if patients, we see a lot of people on weight loss drugs today, Wegovy, tirzepatide, Ozempic, things like that. If you have a patient who has a dramatic improvement in their lifestyle changes, whether it's through exercise or weight loss, and then you see them back about 6 to 12 months later, and their blood pressure is now approaching those great, what I call green light goals, 120/80, that's when you can have a good shared decision-making discussion with your patient to say, should I start reducing these medications? Because you can see patients really have dramatic improvements. As long as you have close monitoring of those patients with their outpatient blood pressure monitoring, I think it is reasonable to start withdrawing drugs in the appropriate setting.
Just remember this, folks, as you're listening to Dr. Stephen Cook, if you were deciding to cook tonight for dinner or over the course of this weekend, first and foremost, make sure that you are reducing the amount of sodium that you're putting into your food. That's the most important thing. Plenty of water, and then everything else that we talked about in terms of those dietary things as well. Limit your alcohol, no smoking, etc. Doctor, it is all great information. It is stuff I think that resonates with a lot of people, and it's a very important discussion. So I appreciate your time today in sharing with us everything about hypertension. Certainly have a good weekend, all right?
Oh, it's my pleasure. You too.
Dr. Stephen Cook, non-invasive cardiologist for Franciscan Health. Much appreciated. All right, we come back. We will give you our score predictions. We will also do the Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com crossover. Hand it off to John. We'll do it all on the other side here, Query & Company on a Friday. You will find John. It is time for the crossover chat, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com. You just heard me talking them up. They are the very best, an official Hale heating and cooling dealer. John, huge weekend in sports, and I know you're going to have a lot of fun talking about it over the next couple of hours. What's lined up on the big show?
No, we got Don Fisher, voice of the Hoosiers, on his way to Iowa City on his birthday today.
Heck yeah.
I think Don is, I think, 30 years old because the dude looks 30 years old. Nothing's pissed me off over the years more than Don Fisher's looks, Jake. Honestly, you know what I mean?
You know,
the guy doesn't age.
I'm going to tell you something that's very uncomfortable, okay?
Yes.
Don Fisher has great calves. Is it uncomfortable for me to say that?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing, though. I think I have great calves too, so I don't feel that way. I'm just his looks that's everybody sees that. Like I think my calves are pretty solid, Jake. To be quite honest with you,
all right,
I'm impressed with my own calves. But no, you look at him and the dude doesn't age, right? But happy birthday to Don Fisher. He's going to join us. I think Mike Wells is going to return. I have no idea where that dude's been for the last 2 months. But he's going to resurface, Jake, later on today. And we got the high school, college football schedule, Colts stuff, Joel A. Erickson of the Star. Hagen's going to be here. I've got Raiders, Colts tickets. Have you ever been to Behringer's? This is right up your alley. I know that Shannon would love this place. Would love it.
She would.
Yes.
I have not been there. Enlighten me.
Oh, it is. Well, I mean, Dillinger, drank here. You know, there's the word that Capone did. It has a sign out there that says, the last spot to eat or drink or whatever here out front. I mean, it's been around here forever, since 1879.
Cool. Yeah, that's
1879,
cool.
I think. So I think Laura Ingalls Wilder rolled through here once upon a time, half pint, and had a half pint of her own.
Yeah, Albert was with her. Yeah, okay.
Albert talked with a lisp in here, and
right.
it was great.
They were strategizing how to get back at Nellie about something. Yes.
Honestly, Albert didn't have a lisp. He just had his nose stuffed full of cotton or something all the time.
that is also correct.
Albert always talked like this. Hey, Paul, what are you doing? And I go, good Lord, man, blow your nose, brother. Come on, Albert.
John, what happens on Sunday in Los Angeles?
The Colts lose. What do you think? You like that?
You know
I think
what?
They lose on Sunday.
It's hard to argue that, but then I keep going back on it, and I'm like, you know what? They're 3-0 at this point, and I'm not overly impressed with who the Rams have beaten. And I think the Colts, if the Colts don't turn the ball over, I think the Colts win. I'm going 24-23 Colts. Am I nuts?
Well, no, you're not, because they haven't turned the ball over, like at all. So you're right. If you do thank you, Kev. If you do that, then you're going to end up winning that game. I just think – I thought what we saw from the Rams last week with that bad beat, I thought what we saw from them is one of the better teams, certainly in the NFC, even in a road loss to Philadelphia right then. And
Kenny Moore. They dominated that game for the better part of it. Yeah.
They're going to have a lot of backups in there. They have some backups in the secondary as well, so the Colts, Jake, can take advantage of it. But, man, I just think coming off of that loss, the way that went down last week in Southern California – I mean, we know this to be true. I mean, their fan base is going to be about as excited as a toothache, right? Normally, they don't have much of one out there, do they?
No, it's all people from, that's what I mean, people in L.A., man, they're all from elsewhere, right? So they're there to go see their local team. Whoever
it was
comes
Peter Brady's favorite team, though.
Peter Brady, actually, I don't know if you know this or not, but Peter Brady invited me next year during the Long Beach race. Christopher Knight invited me to go to the Brady house with him to have pork chops and applesauce. True story.
Are you guys going to go sing in the choir together and be called the Canary?
The Glee Club.
Deacon Jones has to the Glee Club, and then Deacon Jones has to defend you.
That's right. And then afterwards, if we're really lucky, Joe Namath will come over for my little brother and throw around in the AstroTurf backyard. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
Can you imagine in that era? They had the fearsome foursome back then. Merlin Olsen, speaking of Little House on the Prairie, was a part of that. But
Rosie Greer was too, wasn't he?
Yeah, Rosie Greer. These guys all had, three of the four had major careers afterwards. I know that, but here's what's interesting about it. The head slap was what Deacon Jones had as his signature move. Can you imagine how incredibly illegal that would be today?
Correct. He'd be suspended for half the season. Correct.
Yeah, he would never, ever play. Deacon Jones with the head slap back then. But a guest appearance on the Brady Bunch, and he told Peter to stay in the Glee Club.
That's right.
Even though he was a Canary. Yeah. Lamar Lundy. Lamar Lundy, and you know that Todd Meyer jumped in on that. My bad, Todd. Lamar Lundy was the other. Yes.
Yeah. All right, John's up next. He'll be with you until up until what time are you out there at Behringer's, John?
Wow, we do Colts happy hour coming up from 6 until 7, and then I just hear now that Eddie Garrison's got to go to a wedding and is not doing the pregame. I don't know who the hell's doing the pregame then.
Eddie, who's doing the pregame?
John Nolan.
John Nolan, the voice of the Fever, will be doing the pregame.
Let me tell you this: he's not tonight. Eddie Garrison is. Just so you know.
All right, John, we'll throw it out to you in a couple minutes here. Enjoy, all right? John from Behringer's. Thanks again, Stephanie White. Thanks to Jeff George. Thanks to Kevin Bowen. And thank you for listening today to Query & Company.